The Ball Guy Show starts right now. Hope you enjoy the show. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. What's going on, everybody? Another episode, and today's guest is very, very special. But before we get to my guest, South Florida drivers, if you get into a car wreck, I love mentioning Warrior Law Group, my buddy Kevin. He's an attorney. He was my attorney when I lived in Florida, and I got to a wreck. And he took care of everything. He made sure that the insurance did not lowball me. The insurance company trying to get out of paying my medical bills. He took care of it. Make sure you hit up my buddy Kevin and let him know that the Ball Guy JC sent you. Also, wepa.fm. If you have not downloaded wepa.fm, you are missing out. I'm partnered with wepa.fm, and the Ball Guy is the Ball Guy's favorite radio station. It's the one I listen to all the time. So make sure you check that out. Coming up, we sit down with Paul T. O'Connor to talk about his powerful and emotional book, The Missing Child, The Life She Lived and the Life She Missed, which is about his mother. This incredible true story takes us through family secrets, adoption, identity, resilience, and one son's journey to uncover the truth about his mother, Charlotte's mysterious past. And let's bring him on. Paul O'Connor. Sir, what an honor. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and talk about this amazing book.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I always like to talk to bald guys.
And I've been bald for a long time. I've been bald since I was 18 years old. I started losing my hair at 13, 14 years old. And at 18, I just shaved it all off. And I haven't looked back since. I don't know at what age I would have really lost all my hair. So I turned 50 this year. So
you got a lot of time left.
In the name of Jesus. Paul, for those just discovering you, who is Paul T. O'Connor?
Well, I'm a retired journalist and journalism professor. I spent 40-something years as a newspaper guy, mostly writing editorials and columns, political columns. And for 30 of those years, I also taught at night in the journalism school, late afternoon at night, the journalism school here at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So I had the dual careers. I'm originally from New Haven, Connecticut. That's where the story is, for the most part, centered. And I've lived in the Midwest, and now I've lived in the South for close to 50 years. That's my story. I'm married to a wonderful woman here. I have a son. He's 43 years old. He lives out in Oregon, and lots of family back in Connecticut. But I'm here. Basically, I'm the lone Southerner in the family.
Okay, so Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So you are not a fan of Duke. You're Tar Heels all the way, right?
Well, I went to Notre Dame, and so I don't root for the Tar Heels either.
Okay,
but when they play Duke, I do. I tell people that if the journalism school has a team, I root for them. But for the Tar Heels, I don't root against them, but I don't root for them either. I've got my own worries on Saturday afternoons.
The reason why I asked is I grew up. Obviously, I'm from Miami, like I told you before we went on. I've always been a UM fan, but I also liked the Duke Blue Devils in basketball. I was a big Coach K fan, so Grant Hill, loved Grant Hill in the 90s. So that's why I asked you that.
Well, JC, if you grew up in New Haven, Connecticut in the 1960s, you were a big fan of Yale football and Calvin Hill. And one of the great claims I have of pride in my sister, who's a few years older than I am, is that she was at a mixer on the Yale campus and she got to dance with Calvin Hill.
Wow. I've heard of Calvin Hill. Yes.
And Calvin
Wow.
Hill eventually found the love of his life, and they produced the son, so that played at Duke. And so I always kind of root for him. And well, of course, he's now in the television booth, from what I understand.
Yes. Yes.
But I grew up a hockey fan, so basketball, basketball is not my concern.
What inspired you to finally tell this story?
Well, you're a storyteller. I'm a storyteller. And we found these papers in 1994, the beginning of 1994. And it just nagged at me for years and years and years. And I made a couple of pretty feeble attempts to use Ancestry.com or something like that to find the names that I had. But it was around 10 years ago that I said, okay, I got to get serious about this. I'm getting up there in age. If I'm ever going to do this, I've got to do it now. And at first it was just I wanted to answer the questions for myself. And then it became, well, okay, I should answer enough of the questions that I can tell the rest of the family the answer to these questions. And then it became, I think I can find this other family, the family that gave my mother away. Well, the descendants of the people who gave my mother away. And then the next thing I knew, we were telling my story at enough dinner parties, what you call a dinner party, having people over for dinner. And finally, people were saying, you've got to write this. Well, it's like everything else in life. Everything snowballs. And the next thing I know, instead of just writing it down and making 100 copies and handing them out to folks, I'm writing a book that we're going to try to get published. And I said, well, I'm a newspaper guy. I don't have any connections in the publishing industry. Well, it turned out I did. I had a friend who got a book published. She mentioned it to her publisher and they said, yeah, we'd love to see it. And they took it. I had the easiest path to getting a book published of anybody I've ever known. So that's how the whole process went in a nutshell.
When did you first realize that there were unanswered questions about your mother's past?
I think I always knew them. There's a comment in the book that there's a section of the book, just a couple of paragraphs, where my sister finds the papers, and she's only 16 years old at the time, and she says to our mother, what are these papers? And my mother goes ballistic, which was not my mother's style. And then I have a memory years and years later of my saying, did you ever have any interest in knowing who these, in meeting these people? And she says, her answer was something along the lines of, why would I want to do that? And don't ever talk about this again. I have no interest in those people. She knew from the time she was, at the very least, from the time she was 21, who the people were, because it turns out she was never adopted. She was a foster child. So her records were not sealed. So she always knew who they were. And she could have contacted them. She could have looked them up, but I don't think she had any interest in knowing who they were. She was that resolved against them.
Do you think she had bitterness?
Oh, yes.
Which makes sense. I mean, which that's what I felt, and I got that when I read that part of your sister going to your mom and asking, "Mom, what's up?" When I read, I picture the person or obviously this is not character, this is real life. I picture the person how they react, and I can only picture your mother's face and her
Mhm.
expression because the way it's written in the book, it's really well. I mean, you did a great job writing that.
Oh, thank you.
I can only picture her. Don't even go there.
Right. That's exactly it. And it was years later that she mentioned this, that I mentioned it to her. There's a funny thing about my mom. My mother was very open in terms of my mom and dad were both far ahead of their times in terms of accepting people of other races and ethnicities. And my mother, didn't matter to her if you were, we were in a multi-ethnic neighborhood, Italian, Irish, you're Lithuanian, whatever it was, Jewish. She loved Jewish people. My father, his stage partner was a black man. How many white black stage partners did you have in the 20s and 30s? I don't think a lot.
I
And,
don't think there
and
were.
yeah, okay. So, but my mother always had this resentment against Poles. And it was kind of Poles in the abstract because her best friend was Polish. My mother
Mm,
loved Polish food. I hated Polish food. Gumpkies. Have you ever had a gumpki? Oh,
no.
oof. I'm sorry if there's any Polish listeners, but I like kielbasa, but I draw the line at
That's as
gumpkies.
far as you go.
It's got some cabbage in it. It just stinks. Oh God, I'm going to get you in trouble with the FCC here. But she just, if there was a good Polish joke out there, she would roar at that. Whereas if you told an Italian joke or God forbid an anti-Semitic or a racist joke, you got no smile out of her. She did not find it fun to be prejudiced against anybody but the Poles. So she knew that she had been born Polish, and
Mm.
she resented it. She does. I'm sure. Well, I can't say that I'm sure, but I wonder if she had any of idea. And I'm not going to tell you because it's at the end of the book. I'm not going to tell our listeners why she was given away. But I don't think that would have made any difference. She would have expected to have been kept despite everything.
When was that single moment that made you say, "I"? When did you? When was it really that you said, "I need to investigate this"? Did you finally decide after she passed away, or were you already thinking about it even before she had passed away?
Oh no. It never crossed my mind. There was a time I had a 3-block walk to work every day. I would park. Anybody who knows Raleigh will know this. Otherwise, you don't know what I'm talking about. I would park behind the governor's mansion, free parking. And I would walk up the street, and I covered the legislature full time every day from inside the legislative building. That meant I had to walk by the archives building. There were always people there stopping me asking for directions. And one day, this guy from Oklahoma stopped me. And we had this conversation, first of all, about where he could find a place to park, but he was there to research his great 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 grandfather or something like that, his role in the Confederate Army from the North Carolina battalions. And he asked me a question. He picked up on my Yankee accent, and he asked if my family fought for the Union. And I smiled at him and I said, in the 1860s, my family were in Ireland throwing rocks at the British. They weren't here yet. But that one conversation just struck me that I didn't really know that my family was throwing rocks at the British. I didn't know anything about the O'Connor family and what they were doing in Ireland. I just know that they came in 1888. That's the only thing I knew. And I knew less about my mother's side, about the people who actually raised her. And that's when, and I think that was probably 1990, 1988, that I started noticing my friends and how they had all these pictures of these long deceased family members, and they knew their stories. And I started to say to myself, you need to get out there and do the research to find out who these people were who contributed to your actual existence. And that eventually took 25 years to come to fruition in terms of me, logging on to the genealogy sites, learning how to use them, and digging up the records, and then pulling out all of this one big envelope that she had of stuff, like with her marriage certificate, her newspaper clippings of the parties she went to, all of that kind of stuff, and then just piecing it all together. She had these great photographs of herself and her girlfriends at the New York nightclubs. They'd go and they'd get a table, and the guy would come along with a big flash bulb and take a picture of these women who were all dolled up, no guys, or maybe just, the entertainer who was saying, whoa, these are all these cute looking women want me to sit with them, 8 of them, and the guy sitting in the middle. But yeah, that's what I had. And I spent years piecing it all together.
Where did the title, why did you choose this title?
It's good. So I will give away that I eventually find my other family. I find Deli Mikolajic's grandchildren. And they tell the story of coming to visit her in Hartford and meeting and getting to know, and of course, love their, at that point, very elderly grandmother and her 2 oldest children, both of whom are older than my mother. And those 2 older daughters, their aunts, mentioned a missing child, and that there was one little girl who was there, and then she went away. So we assume that the missing child of whom they spoke was my mother. There were children who were born but never got home from the hospital. Infant mortality in those days was brutal. But my mother was healthy, and she came home, and she was home for a month. So her sisters, at that time, 11 and 5, would have memories of having a sister who went away. And she was the missing child. And when Steve Nikolajic met my sister, he told that story. And my sister immediately called me and said, you got to write this down. And so we did. And I thought I had a bunch of other ideas, but that was my favorite.
How difficult or emotional was it to revisit or to visit or even to dig into this part of your mother's past?
It has gotten more and more emotional. You can imagine this because you interview people and you do stories. And when you get a great interview with somebody, it's the thrill of the interview that comes first. And then maybe only after you do the interview, do you think about what they really told you. And in my career as a political reporter, there were plenty of times that, I'm so out to get the story that it's only after I put it in the paper that I realize, this is really a sad situation that I've just written about. So it was not all that emotional to me until the last year, when the book is all written and it's going through all of these editings, and we're shaping the marketing process that led us to you. And I'm talking to people who don't know me and telling the story, and they're saying, my God, what she went through. And I was saying, yeah. I mean, to me, she was just my mom, and come on, hurry up and get dinner ready. I got to play a wiffle ball at 6:30. Mom, why can't we have a nicer car? You drop me off around the corner from school. I was fortunate enough to go to a very good parochial elementary school in a very she part of town. It happened when you lived in the projects. You were in the same parish as the rich people. And and so she would drive her broken down car, and she would drop me off a block away, and I would walk. I was so embarrassed. And I never thought I was hurting her feelings, but I probably was.
Well, as children, we never realize, and now that I have kids, they don't realize my kids are adults.
Yeah.
Even as adults, they don't realize at times that they hurt their parents' feelings at times.
Yeah. So I don't know how many years ago it was that I finally realized that I didn't have to remind my son every year to send his mother flowers on Mother's Day. He's good at that.
Too.
Yeah, you too. But he's quite good at that now. So in case she's watching, I don't have to remind him. But certainly when he was in his 20s, did you think to send your mother flowers? Oh, is Mother's Day this week? Yes.
It doesn't change. It's the second Sunday of every month of every year.
It's always graduation day here in the
really?
Research Triangle. Yeah, you've got Carolina, UNC, Duke, and North Carolina State, probably North Carolina Central, and a few of the private schools. They all graduate, and all their parents come into town, and you can't get dinner on a Saturday night without a reservation. So that's how it affects us.
What surprised you most during your research? And again, folks, we might get some spoilers here. And Paul, please do not hesitate to say, I don't feel like sharing that right. This part, you rather people read it. But folks, even if you hear stuff here, go out and get this book. Okay? Go out and get this book, please. All right.
There's the book. I'll tell you what surprised me the most. And it's not a spoiler in any way because it's got nothing to do with the story. What surprised me the most was meeting all of these relatives I never knew I had.
Wow.
And finding out how much in common we have. There is a cousin. He's a third cousin and a fifth cousin. Okay? On the Polish side. Third cousin and fifth cousin, because back in Ukraine or wherever the Poles were living at that time, they had cousins marry each other. Third cousins married each other, which created two streams. So we are third cousins and we are fifth cousins. This guy is so smart, it scares me. But he's so nice. And the thing that I was proud of is that he was a councilman in his little town in Massachusetts. And he was called the Idiot of the Week by Bill O'Reilly on the Fox News Network because they had taken down the Christmas lights. Well, it turned out the Christmas lights were about to catch fire. So they had to take them down, and Bill O'Reilly turned it into a big, anti-Christmas thing. He says, I was trying to keep the town from not burning down. Anyways, but it was the extent to which these people who did not know me, except, invited me into their homes. Wow. We went out with Ron in Springfield. We went out to dinner a couple of times. The amount of work that people will do for you in their family tree to find the connections And you're doing all of this through email. And then one day you reach them through the telephone, and you meet them, and 2.5 hours later you're saying, wow, this was one heck of a. So that was outside of what happens in the story, which is, I'm not going to tell you. You're going to find it out as you get to around chapter 15 or 16. I'll leave the hint. It has something to do with Princeton, New Jersey. It was just the acceptance that these wonderful people showed to both me and to my sister. Wonderful people.
How's your relationship with them right now?
It's great. Now we'll see after the book comes out, and because I don't think you can write a book and pull punches. So there's things in there about my mother that even my sister didn't want me to put in. I said, Charlene, we're going to tell the whole story. And there's things in there about life in the Mikulajic family that are a little embarrassing. But I think these are very intelligent, very sophisticated people, and they understand that you're not going to put a sugar-coated version of people out there because it won't sound real.
Mm.
Who among us can cast the first stone? Am I getting the Bible right there? That
that's the lady that gets caught in adultery. They bring them all these people, bring her to throw her at Jesus' feet.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, it's Mary. Yes, it's not Mary Magdalene. It's someone else. Because Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute.
No.
But anyway, yeah, and it's a realistic look at these people, and it's a look that for almost all of the characters is far more positive than it is negative. It's just amazing to me what people in that Depression generation lived through. And then they're coming out of the Depression, and then all of a sudden their boyfriends and future husbands are going off to war.
Mm.
And there's some real war stories in this crowd. We were just talking today, or I was just reading today about Iwo Jima. I had an uncle who fought there. We had another uncle who was in a German Stalag for 5 months at the very end of the war. Another uncle who, fought his way across France. So, they go through all of this pain in the Depression, and then they go through a war. And then they have a generation of irresponsible, ungracious, selfish kids like my generation, the boomers. And they didn't have an easy life. I digress at times, you might notice, JC.
No, this is awesome. Honestly, I love stories. It's one of the reasons I do what I do.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I do this. I love stories. And some people say, oh, I'm so sorry if I went through. Listen, the longer you go, the better it is, at least for me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for those of you that don't like long episodes. I do.
Well,
I love them.
They can always stop it and come back later.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it. This being recorded, okay, and it's going to be shared later on. Paul, were there? And again, we go again, and I'm going to probably repeat myself a couple of times. You don't have to go into details. Cause I know that you want the actual the meat of it to be read,
right?
But were there discoveries that completely shocked you, or that shocked your family?
Well, there's the one that I'll mention, and anybody who reads the book is the one in Princeton. I think I think the one that shocked me that I'll talk about. There was a day I was in the state library in Hartford, Connecticut. And the state library is right across the street from the state capitol. And any of our listeners who drive up through New England and get a chance to drive through Hartford, Hartford's a city with its problems, but it has this beautiful park called Bushnell Park. And Bushnell is connected to the state capitol grounds. It's just beautiful. And the Connecticut State Capitol is beautiful. So you walk across the street and there's the state library, state Supreme Court building. So I'm in there trying to find some records, find some information about my family. And I run out of time on my parking meter. So I go out and I get in the car and I have to leave because you can't meter jump. They'll give you a ticket. So I get in the car and I said, I know what I'll do. I'll go to the house where my mother was born, to this poor Polish immigrant family. And so I type in the address into my GPS and it says, turn around. I turn around and I go to this such and such street. Okay, it's 200 feet. Take a left. I take a left. Go 200 feet and take another left. Okay, I went 200 feet, took another 500 feet, took another left. You are at 9 Oak Street. And it's wait a second. My mother was born in this very nice neighborhood. How is that possible? I thought these people were indigent. Now, the house she was born in was no longer there. It's been replaced by a parking lot. But there were all of these houses that were built in the 1880s, and they were all triplexes. You know, three apartments, but very, not luxurious, but this was certainly no immigration ghetto. And the surprise, I remember calling my sister and I said, this is going to screw up all of our assumptions. We just assumed that they gave her away because they couldn't afford her, which was very much what was going on at the time. And the other thing that I thought, my other assumption was that they gave her away because my biological grandmother was not healthy. Well, that woman, we found out through a couple of years of research, she was strong as a bull, and she was plenty healthy. She had a very bad record when it came to birthing children. She had 9 or 10 pregnancies and lost 5 of them.
Wow.
Yeah. My mother had the same. My mother had 7 pregnancies and lost 5.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I had one brother who made it to being baptized. John.
Really?
Yeah, he probably came at 7 months.
I'm so sorry, Paul.
Yeah, he was the first. And then so my sister was born right after the war. I won't mention the year because she doesn't want everybody to know exactly how old she is. I don't blame her. And then, they thought they were done. And then somehow I came along and kind of ruined my sister's life by being this little brat she had to take care of. But I would say short of the Princeton revelation, what I learned in Princeton, New Jersey, that was one of the biggest surprises.
Now, you said that the home is not there anymore. Are there any pictures? Did you find any pictures of the home?
That's the funny thing.
Hmm.
If you go into the archives of the Connecticut State Library, it's one building, a couple of floors of the library, a couple of floors of the state Supreme Court. You go in the archives, they have pictures of it being built. And let's see, my mother was born at 7 Oak Street or Oak Avenue. You can see in the pictures, you can see 9. You can't see 7.
Oh, wow.
It's just the angle that the photographer took. She must have been on the corner. And so that whole block, several hundred feet along Oak Street, was cleared, and they built the headquarters for the Connecticut Teachers Association. I don't know the exact name of it, Education Association. So I wrote to them, and I said, I'm doing this research. Do you happen to have any photos in your archives of the property before you had your building constructed? And they looked through everything, all of the back issues of their news. And they said, we don't have anything that goes all the way to the corner. They had pretty much the same pictures that the state archives had. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the neighborhood, you look at the houses that back up on the parallel street, and you look at the houses that now are down, but were in those photographs, you know that it was a triplex. Oh, and it's also mentioned in the city directory that it's a triplex. So, and I grew up, New Haven has a lot of triplexes too. So I was very familiar with those buildings.
Wow. Exactly how long did this journey take from beginning to the finish of the book?
Well, let's say that I will say that I started seriously with I will say that the beginning of my serious investigation starts when I subscribe to Ancestry.com. And I don't have any financial reason to give them a plug, but I've used that service ever since. And that was at the end of 2016. And it was in the summer of 2017 that I took their DNA test. And by that time, I was full blown into it. And I can tell you exactly. Oh, I finished writing the book in April of 25. April of 25. I wrote the book down in Southern Pines, North Carolina, which is known as the town right next to the Pinehurst golf courses. There's a writing retreat down there. They were kind enough to let me spend a lot of time down there away from the distractions. So how many years is that? That's 9 full years.
Yeah.
And then you have over a year of dealing with the publisher and the proofs and the design of the book. I had no idea. If you go through a big publishing house, of course, and you have a great book that they want to rush out because it's, the latest breaking news story, they can get them out in a matter of weeks. But when you're with a Torch Flame, is a much smaller publishing house, and it took longer. But I never expected it to take this long. And we still don't have very many printed copies of the book. So they supposed to be printed pretty soon, because the book will be available in bookstores on the 26th of May.
Okay.
Yes.
And through Amazon as well, or?
Oh yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Book Hub.
Through Kindle as well, so people can read it online.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Kindle is for sure. It will be available on the 26th through Kindle, because it's all uploaded, and people
Yeah.
who have ordered it have been told that to look in their Kindle on and their Nook, which I think is
Mhm.
is the Barnes and Noble version.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, and it's there, and I think the actual hard copies will be printed in time. It better be, because I have 100 people coming to a book launch party, and I've already paid for the venue.
Oh wow.
It's going to be awfully embarrassing if all my friends
Well,
say,
we gotta keep it in prayer and keep our fingers crossed that it does come
"Please
through.
do, please do." There's probably more important things to pray for, but if you can just tack
No,
this
no,
on to,
listen, no. There's nothing too small, and that's one thing I will say. Nothing's too small and nothing's too big.
okay, good.
So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Was there ever a time you said, did you ever think about giving up on the search?
No, I did any number of times consider giving up on the writing of it.
Okay.
And I think yeah, I mentioned earlier that I worked at least 2 jobs most of my life, most of my professional life. And when I retired, I walked out of the journalism school in May of 2018. I said, "That's it. I'm not working anymore. I put my money aside. I did my investing. I paid off my house." And there were times that this was too much like work,
Mm,
which is when you get about 15, 20 years older, you will fully understand that expression. This is too much like work. And I have a wife who is all 90 pounds of her. She is a pit bull. And she would not let go. "You are going to publish this thing. Okay, I'll print 100 copies and give them to friends. You're going to print thousands, and we're going to sell this. This is a great story." So just to keep her off my back, I kept writing. And I think it was the right decision.
absolutely.
Yeah, because you send these books out in the way that I was able to send it to you as a digital format, and it's nice to hear from a fellow like you that you've enjoyed what you've gotten to read so far. The thing that really hit me was the woman who has a blog, and she has a daughter whom she adopted, and that daughter has exhibits some of the same sensitivities that my mother had. And this woman wrote to me and she said, "I couldn't put this book down because it just perfectly mirrors what my daughter is going through." And the one thing I will give away is there's 2 climaxes to the book. And one of them's a happy ending, and it has something to do with adoption. And adoption and foster children. And she was just she wrote this glowing piece. I mean, I think she'd rate my book higher than The Great Gatsby, and which it doesn't deserve. But that has really been there have been a couple of responses like that from the early reviewers, and that has really been heartwarming to know that there are people out there who are in that world who suffer the same sensitivities that my mother did about having been given away, and now they can see that there is a happy ending to this. My mother was really loved by everyone in the family because she was the one who kept it all together in the craziness of the family that she was put into when she eventually she ended up in. She was the one who, as a 9-year-old, kept it together for the 2 little girls. And then as they grew up, and all the craziness that life throws at us. My mother just kept it all together, even though her life was crazy. My father was this wonderful man, but boy, my God, he could not support a family. He messed up everything, and, but he was beloved because he was such a nice man. Anyways, I'm getting off key again.
No, you're good. Please, please. Why do you think families sometimes keep painful secrets hidden for generations or for such a long time?
People, we assign shame or guilt or stigmas
Ooh.
to people so cruelly. Okay, so my mother was given away. She had absolutely nothing to do with that. She was a month old when the woman who birthed her carried her to the St. Agnes home in Hartford, Connecticut, and gave her away. Never came back for her. How is that a stigma on my mother? I don't know. But she was so ashamed of it. She was hurt in an accident. She had a scar. She was doing nothing wrong. She was on the sidewalk. Somebody else screwed up. It was a stigma on my mother. And we just want these things to go away. We don't want to be remembered for them. I want to remember you because with all of that working against you, you still led it was a very much a working class successful life, but it was a successful life. You raised two children who you got them educated. They did, well enough in the real world to be comfortable now. You have grandchildren, and yet your life was a success. And yet she was burdened she was haunted by these things that did not go right in her life. And I guess she wanted them to go away. And I think that's what it is. We're ashamed of these things that happen in our lives. And I know some people ought to be ashamed of the things they do, and they're not ashamed at all.
Yeah.
Just look at the newspaper.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I'm with you because I do agree. And sometimes people are ashamed of stuff that out of their control.
Yeah.
Totally out of their control.
Yeah.
What does identity mean to you after writing this book?
Identity has always meant the same thing to me. I have always identified as an Irish American. And when I found out that biologically I'm half Polish, it made no difference. I did not apply for Polish citizenship. I applied for Irish citizenship, and I got it. So I'm a dual national now. That's something I'm very proud of. I'm maybe too much information. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I went to Catholic school from second grade through university. And I very much identify as a cultural Catholic. There are things not theological, just cultural about Catholicism. And I've lived in the South for 50 years, and I'm still a Yankee. I am still a New Englander. I still call Connecticut home, even though I left when I was 22 or 23 years old. And those are all the things. And I have always identified as who I am. And that's just who I am. And it doesn't mean that I think I'm better than anyone else. It just means that this is who I am. So I must have gotten that from somebody. And I suspect that I got it from I may have gotten it from my father's side. not from him so much as from his brother and his sister. But I'm sure that my mother had that very strong identification too. She was, in her mind, she was Irish, because the people who took her out of the orphanage, they had been off the boat for a few years, but they still spoke with a heavy Irish accent. So my mother, when she was 7 or 8 years old, she spoke with what we call an Irish brogue. And I will not dishonor myself by trying to speak with an Irish brogue now. It's pretty pathetic, but I could just imagine her and speaking that way, because the woman who was so great to her to bring her home, she was right up, she was off the boat.
I remember reading in the book at the beginning that these children are called inmates.
Yes.
I did not know that.
And
is that why we call inmates? Does my ignorance? I don't know if it's an ignorant question or not. Is this why we call inmates in prison? It's not because we treat them like children. They need to be under law, under rules.
I hadn't thought of that, but I looked into this. I talked to someone at the Connecticut Genealogical Society, and I told him that I was struck by that word. Excuse me. And she was a lawyer. She was a whatever a genealogical lawyer is. She said, "Oh, that was a term of endearment. That was not a disparaging term in the 1910s and 1920s. It only became a slur against someone in later years as it got associated with prisons. But in those days, it was considered, you were a resident, you were a student, you were an inmate, which, still to this day, having encountered that 10 years ago, I say, God, that's a harsh thing, isn't it?"
That's what I thought. I go, wow, really? I go, wow, maybe it's not meant for them. Maybe it's meant for, maybe an inmate is not what I thought it is. And maybe that's what we call inmates in prisons, because they need to be under rules. They're treated pretty, not like children, but I don't know. Then when I shared that with my wife was, really? I go, babe, this is what the book says.
Yeah. The Catholic Church is just promoted. They have this whole process where you become a saint, and there's several steps. Maybe you've heard of this. And I think it's Father Flanagan who founded Boys Town in Nebraska. He's now moving up the ladder towards sainthood, and he had this whole idea of an orphanage that was quite different from the traditional model of orphanages, which were that they were basically hellholes. He felt that children in an orphanage should be educated, well fed, respected, and loved. And he was, his model, his Boys Town was the model that the priest, the bishop in Hartford, relied on when he created the St. Agnes homes. Beginning, I think they started construction or fundraising in 1912, and it opened in like 1915 or 14, somewhere in there. Forgive me for not having the exact years.
No.
And I was really touched when I learned that they didn't wear institutional clothes. The women in the neighborhood, in the parish, put together scraps of material that they had, made individual clothes, so that little Billy didn't have the same kind of shirt that little Johnny had. They all had individual, unique clothes that some nice woman had sewn for them. So the whole concept of calling them inmates just seems So, but again, it's it's our 2026 ears hearing the word. There's another example in the book. My father's partner his name was Howard Moore, and he was a black man. He was 4 years older than my father. He was immensely gifted. He could have gone on and been an early version of Sammy Davis Jr., but he left New York and he came back to New Haven, and he remained just a local entertainer, Connecticut entertainer. Well, Howard his nickname was Shine. Howard Shine Moore, and his stage name was Shine Moore. Can you imagine, JC, in this day and age, a black man who would take on the nickname Shine? That's pretty offensive to our 2026 ears. It was offensive in 1983 when my sister went to visit him at the VA hospital, and she asked for Howard Moore, and he said, "Child, why are you calling me Howard? You know I'm Shine." Again, our ears today hear one thing that's contradicts the way things were in their day.
I think back in the days, also people had thicker skin, also. So
I think that's very much the case.
yeah,
without getting into politics. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, and certainly having been, in the media for my whole adult life, it was such a pain in the neck to have to keep track of how you were going to offend somebody by saying something or other. I am totally repelled by the concept that them and they is used for in the singular now, so you don't have to identify the gender of someone. Oh my God.
It boggles my mind too, and it's. I mean, to me, it makes no sense. And me being, I'm a Christian. I was raised Catholic, but I'm a Christian, believe in Jesus Christ. What God says. Yeah, I'm a podcaster who happens to be a Christian, and I'm going to say it here: 2 genders.
Yeah.
I don't care if this is my last episode ever. I'm not going to shy away from that. Yeah. Let me ask you: when you as you are uncovering the truth, did you bring closure, or do you even have even more questions now, even after writing the book?
No, I closed the 2 main lines of inquiry. There are things we'll never know because everyone is dead. Who would know these? For example, my mother had a social worker until she was 19 years old. And she would not have had a social worker had she been adopted. But because she was a foster child, the Catholic Family Services continued to have a social worker in touch with her. I often wonder if that social worker told her backstory. Did the social worker say, "Oh yes, this is who you are, and blah blah blah, this and blah 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 that, and this is why you were given away, and this is where your biological family lives"? Because sometimes people are cruel, and maybe as a way of disparaging someone said this. I have no idea if that was said or not.
Mhm.
I can tell you that my father's sister lived less than 2 miles away from where the Mikolajic family lived in Hartford.
Wow.
It would take 2 turns in the car. So if my mother went to visit her sister-in-law, turned right out of the street, and then right, and then another right, she would be on Francis Avenue. And she could have gone to that house. I'll never know if she did. My guess is she never did. And maybe this is something that will be revealed in the afterlife if there is one. But no, there's questions that I know I'll never get an answer to, but the ones that I knew I could get an answer to, I did get.
And the questions that you're never going to have an answer to, you're okay with.
Yes.
How did your family react once they learned the full story, or once about the book? I know you say your sister didn't want certain things published, but how about the rest of the family?
They don't know yet.
How do you?
Okay, let me put it this way. My mother, at the age of 8, goes into her second family. And that is a family that's related to the Irish woman who brought her home.
Mm-hmm.
She immediately becomes the big sister to a 3-year-old girl and an infant. Those 2 women, when I was growing up, they were my aunt Leona and my aunt Shirley. And they were as close to me as anybody on the planet. I could not have written this book while they were still alive. They would be angrier at me at the pearly gates than my mother will be. I might get a spanking from Shirley. She will be so angry. At one point, Shirley's oldest son said, well, we're not really related to Aunt Charlotte because, biologically they weren't. His mother got so angry at him. And she said, don't you ever say that again. Charlotte is my sister as much as Leona is. And that's all we're ever going to say about it.
And that's good, because sometimes people say, well, blood, you might not be biologically, but family's family.
Family is family. And I can tell you, my father died just before my 11th birthday. And I don't celebrate Father's Day so much as I celebrate Uncle's Day, because I had 3 uncles who, from that day forward, chipped in. My baseball coach, my English tutor, the guy that taught me how to use a wrench to the miserable extent that I can use a wrench. I had 3 uncles with 3 different sets of skills. And and they all chipped in. I became the 3rd son to Uncle Joey. I became the replacement son to Uncle Ted. His son had died just before I was born. And I became, and when it came to John, I was the nuisance across the street who wanted to know everything about politics. He was a politician, and he was a lot more conservative than I am. But he would just say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I love politics, and you would think that I would talk more politics in my show, but I don't, just to avoid pissing anybody off, just to avoid. But I love politics. I do love politics.
Well, I did it for 43 years, and I will tell you that if you cover politics for too long, it really does become toxic.
Mm.
And I could never go back to covering politics. It just and I saw this when I was 50 years old. I'd see the guys who were 75, and they would be just so bitter and so against the political system. And I'd say, this is fun. We're having a great time. And right now, those guys are long gone. Those reporters are long in their afterlife. And I'm at that age, and I'm just saying, oh God, I could never, ever go back to the Capitol or the legislative building. I don't even want to go to the city council meeting. I don't want anything to do with it. It is toxic. And I think we have enough political commentators. We don't have enough people like you. The episodes that I watched that I had come across before, we were put in touch with each other. There were a couple of musicians I'd never heard of. So introduce me to musicians I'd never heard of. Now, I'm a Sinatra fan, so I'm an old time guy, but it's always fun to be introduced to something new.
I'm glad, Paul. I'm glad you enjoyed those episodes. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Let me ask you: were there moments where emotions became too overwhelming?
No.
No.
It was that reporter's detachment that when I had to cover a story, one day I had to cover a story. I had to go to the cemetery where a father was burying his two daughters who were killed in an automobile accident.
Okay.
And you have to train yourself to suppress that until you write the story. Then you can go cry or just shudder at what you. And that's the way this whole thing was treated. And I think I said this to you earlier, or maybe I said it to someone else I spoke to earlier this morning on a radio program. It is only since I started talking to people who have read the book and they have given me their impressions that I've really come to understand the pain my mother was in. The absolute and the pain that just so many people are in. You just watching something on the news about some young lady who she and her husband, one of them lost their job, and gas is now $4.50 a gallon, and this and that, and they'd hoped they'd been saving to buy a house, but now they're going to need to use their savings just to be able to pay the rent in their apartment. And the pain that people go through, emotional, financial, emotional, whatever it is, that there's so much suffering in life, and I really came to think about the story as a whole and what my mother went through. And I've had a great life. I've had my setbacks and everything, and we all do. You have, I'm sure. But, it's nothing like what she went through, and nothing like a lot of people are going through every day of the year. So it only hit me after the book was done. Only hit me hard after the book was done.
Yeah, you were able to actually process everything.
Yeah. And think of it as a whole.
Yeah.
And constantly, the process is you write the thing, and you write it in 2,000, 3,000 word segments, then you put it aside and you write the next chapter, and the next chapter might be something that's lively and fun. Then when it comes to editing, you have to go back and reread the thing. I've read the book about 6-7 times since I finished writing it. And that's when it really starts to hit you. This is not some character in a novel. This is not Wuthering Heights. I never read that. This was my mother who went through this. And God, how did she keep going? I don't know. And how did she keep giving? You got me. You got me.
Well, she was resilient, obviously.
She was resilient is the word. And she could pinch a penny. It's in the book. It's in the book.
Let me ask you about your father real quick. I
Yeah.
remember reading he shared the stage with Shine Moore, Jimmy Durante.
Jimmy Durante. And he was the other guy, Tom Sullivan he was even more famous at the time than Durante, but he has not stayed in the public eye. He's not survived in the public history. And my mother and my father appeared on stage in New York a couple of times with these guys. When he was ill in 1962, there was actually a mention in the New York Post in the entertainment column to keep out good thoughts and send prayers to Okie O'Connor, because he's at the Veterans Hospital in West Haven, Connecticut, and that appeared about a week before he died. He was a song and dance man. He wasn't much of a dancer. He told lame jokes, and he could only carry a tune. But he was kind of like that utility infielder on the team. If you're a baseball fan, he's not a star at anything, but he can do a little bit of everything, and the fans love him. And he was known as the mayor of New Hallville, which is a big neighborhood in New Haven, which is, if you know the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, the rifle that won the West. Yeah, he worked there, and we lived on Winchester Avenue, and that's all the New Hallville section. It's the industrial side of old New Haven, as opposed to the Yale, the Yale and the bank side, the affluent side of the town. It was the factory part. And he did a regular show at the New Haven County Jail most Sunday mornings, just to give the prisoners a little joy on a Sunday morning. He was that kind of guy. He was extremely giving, but boy, he could not support a family. He could not. So,
what was the hardest chapter to write for you?
Oh, the first one. The very first one. In the newspaper business, you learn very quickly that if you do not grab the reader with the first couple of paragraphs, they're going to move on to the next story. And so I wrote a chapter, an opening chapter, and not old, she's the same age I am, a long-time source of mine in government, who's a very, very good writer, very, very funny person, said, let me read a chapter. And she came back with an hour and a half worth of criticism. And I just said, you're absolutely right. This chapter does not make me want to keep reading about this woman. I have not. The bold guy is going to come across this first chapter, and there's nothing in here that's going to convince him or persuade him to read chapter 2. And so I had to keep going over and over and over that. There were also other chapters. There's so many damn names in this book where I was getting confused. And they're all these Anns. So my grandmother was an Ann. The woman who took my mother in was an Anna. My mother's middle name was Ann. Oh God! And then Anniella was somewhere in there. I was getting the characters mixed up, but as a pure challenge as a writer, it was that opening chapter and getting the flow. The book took a major revision about 2.5 years ago. Originally, the name of the book was The Motherless Child and the Mayor of New Hallville, where I wrote one chapter about my mother, then one chapter about my father, first about the Polish side, and then about the Irish side. And and that's when I realized, when I rewrote that first chapter, that's when I realized that by writing about my father in parallel chapters, that I was wandering away from the real story. The real story is my mother, even though my father is a more interesting guy than my mother. But my mother has a more interesting story.
Right.
I don't that may not make sense to people, but my father was the kind of guy that everybody wanted to know. Walking down the street with him, even when I was 4 or 5 years old, he'd be constantly stopped. People want to come up and shake Oki's hands. How you doing? What's going on? Tell me the latest going on in the politics and all that stuff. Even though he wasn't a politician, he was a politician without running for office. You know what I mean? He had that personality that everybody.
I remember reading that in the book, that he's the unofficial.
The unofficial mayor of New Hallville. Which, if you ever get to New Haven, is, believe me, it's it's no great prize, the New Hallville section, but it's where I grew up, so
It's
I was
home.
proud of it.
What do you hope readers emotionally take away from the story?
I hope they take away the sense down here in the Triangle of North Carolina. Jim Valvano is a cult hero. And Valvano is known, the basketball coach at NC State, for the speech that he gave at the ESPN Awards, I think that were, as he was dying of cancer. And he gave this speech in which he said, "Don't ever give up. Never, ever give up." And I used to see Valvano in the grocery store. Something, I don't think you see basketball coaches who make $10 million a year today in the Harris Teeter, but he would be in there. Anyways, I hope that people will realize that my mother never gave up. All of these things, and we haven't gotten into very many of them, that knocked her down. She kept getting up. She educated her 2 kids. She eventually owned her own home, as modest and really modest as it was. She paid her bills, and she guided her sisters the best she could. And my mother loved to travel, and she found a touring company that she could afford, and she saw Europe. She saw the Caribbean. She even got to China. She always wanted to go to China and see the Great Wall.
Wow.
And when she got home, she said, "I never want to go to China again. The pigs hanging in the butcher shop, flies on them." Well, that's one reason I've never wanted to go to China. So yeah, that's what I would take away. Though, you take away from this that as hard as life is, you can, if you keep going, there's a good chance something good's going to happen to you. You're going to make it. You're going to end up okay. Yeah. Well, we all end up dead, but you're going to achieve some of your goals. And she certainly did. She certainly did.
That's awesome. Was there or maybe there still is fear about have published something about family truths publicly.
Well, no, I don't think so. I did this. I wrote about, I put myself out there every day of the week for 40 something years. And I got used to the kind of negative feedback that you could get. So if there is some negative feedback, I think I'll be able to handle it. And do I want people to know, anybody who judges my mother because of the revelations that are in this book, that she was, she was an orphan, that she had scars on her beautiful face. I take it, I would just kind of feel sorry for them in this day and age, that you can't recognize that none of that is important. What is important is that this was a good woman, and she is really a model for what a lot of women are. I mean, my God, it was single parents raising an obnoxious son like me. Bless her, as they say in the South, bless her heart. Bless her heart. Yeah.
What does forgiveness mean in the context of the story?
In the context of the story, forgiveness means forgiving yourself for things that you're not to blame for. I mean, I never had to forgive her because she never did anything I wanted forgiveness for. She just had to forgive herself for being in the wrong spot on the 4th of July, 1933, for being an orphan. Just forgive yourself, Charlotte. It's quite all right. You don't look at your failures, these things you consider to be your failures or your shortcomings or your drawbacks. Look at these as you're in a steeplechase and they keep putting up taller hurdles for you than for everybody else. And you're still winning the race. You're still going to finish the race. That's a metaphor I just thought of. Maybe it's not such a good one. But you think about it. If you're running the high hurdles, the low hurdles, everybody else got low hurdles and you got high hurdles, and you're still going to finish the race. And she did.
Yeah, all this made her stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I will say about my biological grandmother, she didn't have an easy life either. She had the guy she was married to, this Zepon, I can't pronounce their names. I mean, he was a real jerk. And that's what everybody in the family says. And so it is a story of strong women. And if they didn't do everything successfully, they've got to forgive themselves for that, because nobody bats 1,000. Nobody bats 1,000.
No, they don't. Did this experience change how you view parenthood or even legacy?
Well, I'm telling you one thing, I'm burning a lot of my stuff so that I'm not going to leave it to my son to burn it.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. Okay, hold on. These letters, see these? From my college girlfriend. They're all going in the barbecue before in my last weeks. What changed me, what set me up as a parent was my uncles. Having seen the effort they put into being a father to me, including the uncle who had two sons of his own, and then all of a sudden he had three. So instead of taking two boys to the hockey game every Sunday night, he was taking three. And he's saying, Paul, you just got it. You swinging the pitches over your head. You got to stay down. You're going to, blah, blah, blah. And he was giving the same advice to his kids. And it taught me that when Michael O'Connor came along in 1983, you didn't take the afternoon off. You had to be dedicated to your child every day of the year, and the kid had to come first, and I always felt that way, and it was because of my father's death at my young, at 10. I was 6 weeks, I think 6 weeks short of my 11th birthday. And, he had plans to take me. He always took me to Yankee Stadium for my birthday. So what happens? His brother steps in and takes me to Yankee Stadium for my birthday. And I catch a foul ball. Have you ever wanted more proof that there's a God? First of all, God takes my father away from me. Then he gives me a foul ball. And I catch it. Straight in the glove. That's how an 11-year-old thinks, especially when you're in Catholic school.
Yeah.
Sister says, it's a miracle. Anyway.
If your mother could read this book,
oh my God,
what would she think, or what would she say to you?
Get in your room.
I don't care how old you are. You go to your room. Don't kiss your wife goodnight.
Yeah. She would be furious at me. She would be furious. And believe me, it has taken a lot of consideration about this that I published it, knowing that this is not something she would want. But this is a book for the living. It's not for the dead.
Yeah, right.
This is a book for somebody whose husband watches some of this, and he says to his wife, or he says to his daughter, there's this book out. Maybe you ought to read it. It might have some meaning for you. And it's for that person. I think it's a good read too. It's a little bit of a genealogical mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote it that way. And I also wrote it just in case some relative 65, 70 years ago comes along and says, I found out I had this Uncle Paul, and he wrote a book about the family. And now I'm going to know a little bit more about my ancestors. So you write it for all of those reasons. But mostly as I was writing along and realizing this story, what her story said, I said, I've got to. And then the concluding chapters are another completely thing that I'm not going to get into, because that's another whole justification. And I think it's very meaningful for people. It's the whole adoption issue, how that comes around full circle.
Yeah. What would you say to someone searching for their own family history?
Take my master class. I'm putting together a 90-minute master class, and I'll be presenting it at retirement homes and church. I just talked to the president of a local Catholic church, a women's club, and I'm going to come down probably in September. I don't do it for money. just get the story written is what it will basically say. And I'll lay out some parameters as to how to go about writing it.
Yeah.
Because I've been writing since I was, in grammar school. I've been writing stories. But yeah, I would say anybody who hears this and says, "Oh, this is interesting what this guy did," I wonder what his advice to me would be. Just write it all down right now. Go grab yourself a beer or a whiskey and start dictating just all the stories that your Uncle John told you, all the stories that Mom told you, and as many details as you can. Don't worry if it's not presented in a sound foundational approach in terms of literature or anything. Just get it on paper, and then you can go back and work on it. But the very first thing, and there are so many ways now to research your history.
Yeah.
This one cousin that I mentioned, the one that was Bill O'Reilly's Idiot of the Week, or whatever they called him, he has over 7,000 people in his family tree.
Wow.
He goes all the way back to Charlemagne, who was a long time ago, if I remember correctly. All the way back to Charlemagne. That's, of course, I've been told that if you get to a certain group of people in like the 15th century, then there's a clear history that takes you all the way back to Charlemagne. All the work's been done from there if you can tap into one of these people.
Wow.
Yeah, but how about that? I can't get before 1820 because the Irish they didn't keep records because of the British. They didn't want the British to know who anybody was.
What advice would you give to somebody who's actually afraid of uncovering their past?
Oh, I don't know. I would go talk to their priest, go talk to their minister, talk to, because that is something I can't relate to. And again, it's, I think it has something to do with my career that I always had to be out there and open. I mean, I couldn't expect people to tell me their dark secrets if I wasn't willing to put some of mine, with the exception of those letters from Sharon that have got to be burned.
What kept you motivated throughout the process?
The story and my wife. But there were times when I would go 3 months without doing anything.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, did you need a break, or did you need to
maybe I got a little
reset?
Bored. Yeah. And I didn't have anything new. What would happen invariably is that we would go on a trip, or we would have friends over to the house. And Lucy, my wife, would say, "Oh, Paul's working on his book." And I say, "Oh God, she brought this up again." And I'd see how the people were just absolutely, one, their first reaction was they were absolutely amazed by the story. And two, they started telling their own stories. We had a friend over, and this is good 3-4 years ago now. She was raised, by a woman she thought was her mother. That woman was her aunt. Her aunt was her mother. She had been born out of wedlock to this 15, 16-year-old. And the family said, you have to finish school. So we're just going to tell everybody that the child belongs to your sister, who is married, is a little bit older, and hasn't had any children yet. So the baby just went with the older sister, and she was never told until much later in life. I all kinds of crazy stories like that. And every dinner where it came up. And so I'd say, okay, well, right, I really do have a story here, and I need to keep working on it. And then when the opportunity arose to go to this writing center in Southern Pines, the Weymouth Center, I had 2 weeks at a time where I basically would lock myself in the room, and I would write from 8:30 until 11, take a walk, make a sandwich, write from 12:30 till 5, and then go out and enjoy Southern Pines, which is a beautiful little town. If anybody ever wants to go to a lovely little town in North Carolina, it's right next to the great golf courses at Pinehurst. I strongly suggest it. And they have 3 or 4 really good restaurants, so I would just rotate. And then I'd go back and I'd get a good night's sleep and do the same thing over. And it's amazing how much 14 days of doing that, it's amazing how much you can get written. I think I probably, each time I did that, I probably wrote 10 chapters.
Wow.
Yeah.
What kind of books or authors inspire you personally?
I read a lot of history. I always have. I read some politics while I was still in it, but I've always been a big fan of novels. And my 2 favorite books of all time are The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and The Great Gatsby. And then there's about 5 other books that come in right behind those 2. And there's any number of contemporary novels in the last 10 years that I've just loved. And in the last couple of years, I've been trying to read books that are similar to mine. And I've found a few of them. I don't think I have any that I can show you. Oh, the House at Schumannstrasse 7 by Edith Netter is a fabulous book. It's there's a Jewish woman and her family are living in a small city in Germany when the Nazis come. And Edith Netter is that woman's granddaughter. Edith is a retired lawyer in Maine, and she's written this book rather late in life, as late in life the way I've written my book, late in life. And she writes it through the voice of her grandmother, telling the story about how she got out of Nazi Germany and what she had to go through to get out of Nazi Germany. And it's like mine, it's from a small publishing house, so it's not getting a lot of, it doesn't get the oomph that if it was coming from Random House or Simon and Schuster or Penguin, but it's a terrific book, and that's probably the best thing I've read in the last 3 or 4 months.
What's next for you after this book finally goes out? When I was in Ireland in January for a music festival, I just happened across this. It was just an incredible coincidence. I happened across a little bookshop. I went in and started speaking in my best Irish imitation. And the guy immediately saw through me and he says, "Hey, Yank." And we had a great little conversation. And I told him where my family was from, which is this little village in this very southwest corner of Ireland called Ballingskellig. He says, "Oh, we have a book about it." And this is it.
Skellig's Hall. I'm not sure you can get it in the United States, but it's a series of essays that were written about life in Balling-Skellig at the beginning of the 20th century. Well, my family left in 1888. So what he is writing about happening in 1906 probably is not a lot different from what my family was experiencing in 1885 or whatever. And so the next thing I'm going to investigate, I don't think I'll make a publishable book about it, but maybe along the equivalent of a term paper. What was that corner of Ireland, the Ivra Peninsula? What was it like when they found they had to leave? Because my family survived the potato famine and actually came out in very good financial shape. So they, in the early 1850s, they're doing well comparatively for the Irish. And by 1888, they're broke. And they're getting on ships and coming to the United States, following my great grandmother's family that had come over in earlier years, and that's how they end up in New Haven. So that would be the next piece of research I'll do, and but I don't think I'll publish it. It's too much work, the marketing.
So this might be the only book you write.
Yes, yeah, and it's funny that I have a good friend. She was a student of mine, and then we became very good friends in the years afterwards. She calls me Uncle Paulie, and she says, "I can't wait to read this book that you swore you'd never write." And it's the truth. I always said, I will never write a book. I don't have the focus. I wrote 750 words a day. One column, one editorial, maybe two editorials, 500-600 words. I was a sprinter when I swam in high school. I believe in doing something and being done with it quickly. And that's that book, boy, 10 years. It took me a while, didn't it? Took me a while.
Paul, to wrap up, how can people support you? Where can people follow you? Are you on social media?
Yeah, I have a website, and it's easy to get to. It's Ocolum, which is my nickname. OCOLUM as in Mary, and Ocolum at ocolum.com. And that'll show what I'm up to. The book is available for pre-order. If they want to do so, they can buy it online through Amazon, Barnes and Noble, whatever, or they can just go into their local bookstore because the book will be available. I doubt it'll be on the shelves waiting for people. Torch Flame is not a big enough publishing company for that. And yeah, that's how to do it. Whether you get it, buy it as a Kindle or a Nook or whatever. I just want people to read it. I want people to know about my mother.
I encourage people to read it. Yeah, definitely pre-order it. Paul's information will be at the description of this episode. So make sure you please check out his website, and the ISBN of the book will be in the description as well.
Right.
Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Share this episode with people that might have a past and might need to be encouraged or need to be pushed to research the past.
Yeah. And I strongly suggest that people do that. I didn't know my great grandfather's name, but now I know that Jeremiah was a real rapscallion. They dragged him into court at least 6 times. What a thrill to know that your great granddaddy was a real problem in town.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I started asking my son, our middle child. He subscribed to ancestry.com,
Mhm.
and I started getting curious also about my past of my ancestors, and so he signed me up for Father's Day last year,
Ah,
or for my birthday last year, and I started asking my mom for questions, and she gave me the name. So I've been wanting to research on uh my great grandpa. I know one of my great grandfathers was some kind of general or something in Cuba.
yeah, there you go.
That is cool.
That's very cool. And Cuba is a very cool country, as I told you before. But the interesting thing about the way records are kept, if you just look at your birth certificate, it's going to have your mother and father's name, where they were born. Then go get their birth certificate. Now you got your grandfather's name. Go get his. Now you got your great grandfather's name, your grandmother. The records are all there, and you just keep pulling the string, and you keep going back, and then you pull out the city directory, you pull out the citizenship papers, you do all of that, and you just keep reading them over and over and over again, and then finally, oh, that's detail is in there, and that's why that's important to me. And if you do it for 10 years, eventually you figure it out. Believe me. But I've truly enjoyed this conversation. I told my wife it'd be a half an hour to 45 minutes. She's probably down there thinking I'm talking to another woman. No, she isn't.
Yeah, I know I told you 45 minutes to 90 minutes, but hey, I hope you enjoyed it. I did.
did.
I appreciate your time. I appreciate you diving even deeper. Folks, again, make sure you check out Paul's website and pre-order that book. Paul, thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere.
I won't.